Now we're going to have a panel discussion. And the title of this session is Bio is Not Just Another App, Investing in What's Important. And when I saw the title of this, I had to think back to that Silicon Valley show sequence where all of the entrepreneurs come out and talk about, we're changing the world, we're changing the world. But in this case, synthetic biology and the people you're going to hear from actually are. And so in this constantly, rapidly evolving landscape, how do investors keep up? Our panel moderator today is Nav Singh, and he will introduce the panelists. Nav is a senior partner at McKinsey, where he drives innovation at the intersection of science, engineering, medicine, business, and government. So please welcome Nav to the stage and for this eminent panel. Thank you.
If you could have a guest come over, that'd be great. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good time. I'm going to invite our late panelists to come over. Hi, how are you? Come on down. We're going to talk about some investment themes right after lunch. This is great. So we have a truly amazing group of people who have the money, the brains, and the smarts to do all what is needed. I could go through their backgrounds for a long time, and I will probably not do justice, so I would rather have a conversation with them. But I'll have them quickly go around, say 15 seconds about themselves, and we'll jump into a few things here. Next.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for having me, everyone. So my name's Kirsten Stead. I'm a managing partner at DCVC Bio, where we invest in early stage companies across the life science chain where there's a compute element to the technology, including synthetic biology and others. So we're in companies like Pivot Bio, Zymergen, and others. I'm a PhD scientist by background and also an entrepreneur, so I've gone through the pains on all sides of the business, I feel like. So I'll pause there.
My name's Seth Bannon. I'm a founding partner at a seed fund based in San Francisco called 50 Years. We invest at the intersection of three circles on a Venn diagram. So one is deep tech, by which we just mean you probably need a PhD on the team to pull it off. Two is path to $1 billion in revenue if everything goes really well. And then three is path to massive positive social or environmental impact. And I would say about a third of our portfolio is in the synthetic biology space. Of the companies that are part of the SynBio universe, we were early backers of a company called Memphis Meats, a company called Lygos, OpenTrons, Geltor, and many more.
Alicia Jackson. I'm currently in EIR with Jenny Rourke at Genoa Ventures. Jenny and I first met when I launched the biotech office at DARPA, and then we launched our synthetic biology portfolio. We did a number of deals together, her from when she was at F Prime and I at DARPA when we did Zymergen, Caribou, and a few others. And now I've still decided to stay on the entrepreneurial side, and I'm happy to play both sides of it.
Hey everybody, my name is Halawa, and I'm a founding member of Mubadala Ventures. Mubadala Ventures is a venture fund based here in San Francisco and backed by two entities, SoftBank and the Sovereign Wealth Fund for the government of Abu Dhabi, called Mubadala. We invest in early stage deep tech companies in which we can springboard international expansion of through our broad global asset base.
Ganesh Kishore. I spent 21 years at Monsanto as the chief biotechnologist after my PhD in postdoctoral training, 5 years at DuPont as the chief biotechnology officer, and today we are investors in life sciences minus pharmaceuticals. Raja Weiss, Greg Yang, and myself, we are all associated with Spruce Capital Partners, and we are very early stage investors, and we usually help entrepreneurs form companies. And I should say, to some extent, I'm a technology junkie, but on the other hand, I also believe that the opportunities that those technologies address had to be critical for a successful investment.
Great. So we're going to do a quick round robin here. What do we mean by synthetic biology? Because I'm sure all of us have a different view of it. And what truly excites you about it? So maybe let's start over here, and Judge, if you could share your opening thoughts on that.
Well, I think I have a very broad and pragmatic view of what synthetic biology is. So we look at, wherever there is manipulation of nucleic acid or expressions that we want. And, in a previous life, I was at Monsanto Ventures, and people didn't realize that that was a synthetic biology company with a long history. And so I think we've been doing this for a very long time. And I think it's a lot broader than what people would classify. So we generally look at sort of the applications of that in 4 buckets. So there's agriculture, food, therapeutics broadly, and then I would say biotechnology services. And so we tend to view things in the application view, or what is a practical application of that particular technology. And we might do platform technologies where the company actually can work in 3 of those verticals or 4 of those verticals. So we don't necessarily look at what the technology is per se, but what the application is across those verticals.
For us, so at a high level, we see synthetic biology as applying engineering best practices to speed up the design, build, test cycle of manipulating biological systems. And specifically in the reprogramming or the construction of new biological systems. So that's sort of how we see it. Why are we excited about it? Well, we're excited about the applications. So I think biomanufacturing offers a way of saving the climate by replacing the petrochemicals industry with a new, more sustainable way of producing things that people want. I think in terms of biomanufacturing of food, we can give people the animal products that they want without destructive production practices. I think biotherapeutics offer the opportunity to cure the incurable, saving lives while driving down healthcare costs. Bioremediation offers the opportunity to potentially mitigate the impacts of some environmentally destructive things like oil spills or other toxic catastrophes. And on top of it all, we might be able to store all of the world's knowledge and data, whereas now we're throwing a lot of it away. So I think the main reason we're excited about it is the potential impact of the applications.
Simply put, synthetic biology is a new tool. And new tools enable you to solve problems you couldn't solve before. And being able to solve problems you couldn't solve before means you can create new products. And new products means you can create new businesses. That's it.
Yeah, I think I'd like to start with why today for synthetic biology. And I think today more than ever, if you look at the enabling technology that is basically kind of enriching this boom of synthetic biology startups, is really paving the way to synthetic biology entrepreneurs to bring to this field what software entrepreneurs have been bringing for quite some time, right? Which is fast prototyping, cheaper prototyping, and this idea of a quick feedback loop, right? And whether it's DNA synthesis, whether it's sequencing, which has been with us for some time, gene editing, I think we will see the next phase of growth for synthetic biology startups is going to be even more to what we have seen over the past 10 years. And that's why we're excited about it, because it's truly going to pick up from an adoption perspective. And the other part of why we're excited about it is really, it touches every important aspect of a society, right? I mean, whether it's food, whether it's agriculture broadly, whether it's healthcare and medicine, I think the prospect of synthetic biology to change the way that we live, the way that we prosper as a society is going to be quite impactful.
I related the discipline of synthetic biology as a scientific discipline. And it is about effectively and efficiently decoding life. It is about understanding the DNA, the reading of DNA, the writing of DNA, and composing of that DNA. It is about understanding RNA and its role in biology, understanding proteins and making proteins better. It is about understanding the role of metabolites in terms of the impact it has on a cell. It is also about signaling molecules so that we can bring the whole power of biology to improve the way we nurture this planet, to the way we nourish the people, so that we can actually have a sustainable and a cost-effective way of improving our global societies.
Wow, that is pretty broad. So as I look at your investment themes and as I look at the investments you have made, food is an important theme, right? Where are we going with food? Is it going to be real soon? Is it going to be economically viable? Why are you so excited about it? And how are you exploring investments in that space?
So, and I know people on the panel will have diverse things to say, but I think one of the things that we worry about as investors is that the new synthetic biology applications where food is concerned, some groups have not necessarily learned the lessons of the biofuels days of of earlier in this decade. And what we learned there is that you have to be really careful when you're looking at complex biotechnology or even new technology, taking new technology risk, where you're selling into a commodity market. So in the case of biofuels, we had a macroeconomic event affect oil and gas prices, including some regulatory changes that were made. And in terms of food, you have to recognize that if you're using any technology, whether it's a food formulation difference like Hampton Creek, or whether there is some real biotech involved, you are selling into a commodity market where consumer preference is the most important thing. And so your team needs to be built around building on understanding consumer preference, understanding where you need to be on the shelf, what your packaging needs to look like, what your marketing plan needs to look like. And these aren't necessarily the things that a technical founder is initially thinking about. And from a trajectory perspective, on the food side, these technologies often end up, if they're successful, in very different places than when they started.
Can you truly make this happen with the lower margins one would expect in the food business? Is it viable?
Well, let the data speak for itself. So if you look across M&A in the food sector over the past 5 years, they've been, acquisitions have been paying 3x revenue or 15 times EBITDA. That means you need to be revenue positive in that business, which is completely different if you're using the same technology to build a therapeutic. You're going to have zero revenue. You're going to be sort of usually in a phase 2 trial, in a regulatory process. And so I think people really need to think about what business they're in when they start out and build their teams accordingly.
Seth?
So we're very excited about food. So we like massive markets with little innovation that are very broken. So let's sort of examine food. So show of hands, who has purchased a phone in the last week? Got like 2 hands. Who's purchased clothing in the past week? Yeah, I got a few more. Who's purchased food in the past week? Yeah, liar. Yeah, so it's a massive market, right? Okay, so has there been a lot of innovation? Humans first domesticated animals about 10,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, and then used their flesh for food, their milk for nourishment, and their hides for leather. And if you look at how it's gone since, while the scale and sophistication of that has increased, the underlying technology is still the same. We use selective breeding to grow animals that have a lot of meat, and then we slaughter them, cut them up, and then send them off. There are not many markets where there hasn't been a lot of core innovation in like 10,000 years. So I think there's not a lot of innovation. If you also look at the sort of R&D spend of big food, if you take net annual revenue, I think Amazon spends about 14%, Nestle spends 2%, Google spends about 13%, Pepsi spends 1%, and it's true across the entire food industry. And so not a lot of innovation. Is it broken? It's just tremendously broken. So we are failing to feed the world, while at the same time, in places of food abundance, people are getting sick. Because a lot of what you see when you go into a supermarket is literally just poison. On top of that, the methods of production that we're using in the food system are literally destroying the planet. So I think it's an incredibly, incredibly broken space, and I think that synthetic biology can solve a lot of these problems. A company we're particularly excited about is called Memphis Meats, and they're essentially just growing meat by farming cells directly instead of farming the entire animals. Oxford University did a life cycle analysis of it and found that it would require 99% less land, 96% less water, 96% less greenhouse gas emissions, and 45% less energy. And in our mind, when you see those efficiencies from a first principle standpoint, it should be a cheaper, more efficient way than producing meat than traditional animal agriculture. And we're talking about $1 trillion industry, so I think there's a lot of money to be made there.
So like said, when does like Memphis Meat come to our tabletops? By what time frame and at what price points?
So very soon. They're not particularly public about the time horizon, but for sure in the next year and a half, you'll be able to eat it in places where you can buy it. And they're going to take a Tesla-type model where probably initially launch in Michelin-starred restaurants where they can charge a high premium because people care about taste and novelty. And then eventually they'll slide down to the Whole Foods level where people really care about the sustainability. But of course, the way they win the market is by producing it cheaper per pound than conventional animal agriculture.
So you're like going from the high end to the lower end.
Exactly.
So I'm going to disagree with Seth. I actually think there's been tremendous innovation in food.
We want that debate.
I think it just may not be of the flavor you're looking for. One of the most exciting things I'm thrilled about is Amyris going after Reb M. I think that's phenomenal. I think there's been a ton of progress in the ingredients. I mean, and don't get me started all across to ag and the amount of innovation, selective breeding, genetic engineering that we've seen there. I think it's tremendously exciting right now, especially now that you can even buy the Beyond Burgers in the store right now. So, tons of innovation. I think super hard. For all the reasons that Kirsten said, right? Huge market, but very hard to break into. Commodity, price wins on all of this. Market always wins, no matter how cool your technology is. And having a team that can bootstrap their way from the very beginning, from especially if they're just technical, but having them even understand how to approach that market is incredibly hard. So I think as far as big, hairy, complex, exciting, intriguing problems, it's awesome. As far as creating a successful business, super hard and not the first place I would ever start.
Actually, I'm just going to reflect about, if I go to my mom and I tell her, who lives in Jordan, and I tell her, hey, there is a lab-grown meat, how about you cook me something? I think I will know the answer to that, which is she's going to show me the door back to the US. But, and that's honestly the problem, right? The problem is kind of public perception of synthetically produced or synthetic biology-enabled meats. Sometimes we need to go out of the kind of the bubble that Silicon Valley puts us in and look global, right? And see what is the global perception of such technologies. I'm all for sustainability. I'm all for finding new ways of basically breaking new products and new technologies into the market. But I would agree with Alicia, like the power of the markets are potentially going to limit the growth of food technologies going forward if we look outside the United States.
Well, I just got to push back a little bit.
Please.
If you went to your mom and said, hey, Ma, can you make me some lab-grown Cheerios? She'd be like, what do you mean lab-grown, right? But Cheerios started off in a food lab somewhere, right? We don't call it lab-grown, lab-made Cheerios. So it's true that a lot of these new food technologies start off in a lab, but they won't be produced in a lab. They'll be produced in things that look like beer fermentation tanks. And I genuinely don't believe that people like meat because of how it's produced. Right? I think that the more people find out about the methods of meat production in slaughterhouses and all that jazz, the more they pull away from it. I think people love meat despite how it's produced, and so if you can give them the exact same tasty meat they want, but produced in a more sustainable, more ethical way, I think they'll run towards it.
Sure.
Okay. So first of all, I must say that the last 100 years of agricultural research and nutrition has been about calorie nutrition. We have all been concerned about feeding the world from the perspective of the calories that people can eat. We are now at a point in history where the economies of nations are increasing to a point where the middle class can actually afford better quality food. And that better quality food usually translates to having a little bit more protein. I don't think I have seen a customer argue with me as to whether it is meat-derived, cellular meat-derived, or animal-derived or vegetable-derived, but we need more protein. Gone are the days of selling lower calories by adding more water and more air into the food. That was the innovation that fueled the branded food companies of this planet for the last 25 years. Now we need truly original systems. And I'm also bothered, I'm actually very disappointed with our knowledge of proteins in our food system. Proteins are not just proteins. They have enzymatic activities, they produce amino acids, they produce peptides. The role of these molecules in our development, in our growth, in the formation of our immune system, in nurturing the microbiome, none of that is understood. There are huge opportunities not only for basic science, using the tools that are being talked about today, but to create industries of the future which not only meet the basic needs of our society, but also meet them in a highly personalized fashion.
So you're all for foods, it seems.
I'm all for food.
So we've got Seth and Kishore on one side. That's good. Right. What about microbiome? We heard so much talk about microbiome right now. It is it is the talk of the town. It all, of course, links to food also, right?
Absolutely.
What is your underlying thesis around like microbiome? Where are you going with that?
So we've been spending quite a lot of time. We're very, I'm going to turn the tables again. I'm not against food per se. It's just we look for different teams. But so there's a lot of really interesting research now on looking at where we're, kind of a scary kind of way, realizing that a lot of these intermediate metabolites that are being produced by the microbiome are having pretty significant effects on things like epilepsy, autism, dementia, able to travel up through the gut, through those systems. There was, I think, 5 or 6 really interesting papers this year alone, labeling some or defining some of these metabolites. And so I think the next frontier in that we're interested in where it comes to health in general, whether it's food or therapeutics, where it comes to the microbiome, is being able to be more prescriptive, identify some of these metabolites, identify some of these molecules, and think about how we can use them in a practical manner. Up until now, we've been using the sort of black box approach to the microbiome, which is we know that it's involved and we know that some are healthy and unhealthy, and trying to do sort of brute forces approaches to discovery in that space. So I think the next generation of where we're interested in is these sort of prescriptive approaches.
I see all over Twitter right now, Data Collective is anti-food. Might want to clean that one up. I'm very excited about microbiome. I mean, the discoveries that we've been making over the last 10 years and continue to make in terms of the connections between microbiome composition and human health feel as impactful as like the discovery of the electromagnetic field. But in the same way that there's a difference between understanding that the field exists and being able to manipulate it to power the advancement of society, I think there's a big difference between understanding these correlations and actually being able to engineer the microbiome. And so that is what I think is probably the next frontier is microbiome engineering. We have supported one team that I just really, unfortunately, can't talk about that I would really love to, but I think there's a lot of room for some really interesting innovation there.
Microbiome, I agree, super interesting area of science. The one concern I have about it right now is there's been a lot of correlation studies done, not a lot of causation, so I am worried about jumping the gun on that front. That being said, a particular area that I think we're super excited about is prebiotics. The food that you give to your microbiome to help it flourish and grow into kind of a healthy ecosystem. There are lots of things in that space, especially related to infant health, that I think are big opportunities. Much easier to boot up a company around creating a special food for microbes rather than having to actually produce each individual microbe in that kind of community. And then one plug, which I think is coming and even earlier, but I think has a huge play in with microbiome, is the virome and its impact on human health. So fascinating area of science. I think it'll still take a while till we really see companies that can form sustainable businesses off of it.
Yeah, I agree with the fellow panelists. I think the only way for us to lower the healthcare bill is through preventative health. And that's why we invest in color genomics, for example, because we believe in early screening. At the same time, microbiome is definitely an area that's still yet to be understood in a better sense. There are few point solutions over the past, I would say, a few years that have been bubbling. I think companies like Viome, uBiome, and others have the promise of leveraging kind of nutrition and kind of recommendation around these areas to enhance the microbiome profile. But in general, it's an area that we should keep an eye on, keep close to, and at the right time, definitely invest in.
So biome is actually the elephant in the room that we have just recognized. We all knew that we had microorganisms in our gut. We knew that when we grew plants out in the environment, in that rhizosphere, in the region of the root, there were all kinds of microorganisms. We never understood the role of these tissues, these organs, in the metabolism of each one of these organisms. We have started appreciating both the diversity as well as the role they play in the context of the living systems with which they interact only recently. A friend of mine is actually my neighbor. His name is Jeffrey Golden. Please do not confuse him with the NASCAR driver. He is a professor at Washington University, the father of the field of microbiomes, who in the 1980s and 1990s, if you went to a talk or you gave a talk, his first question always would be, do you know what the microbes that are in your gut do to this thing that you are putting into your body? At that time, it sounded strange, but he has leveraged the tools, the modern tools of DNA reading, and also metabolomics and so forth, to systematically dissect the role of these microbes. It is not just about microbiome engineering that's going to be important as far as the future is concerned. This organ is going to play an important role, obviously, in human biology. We heard a talk from Evolve earlier today about the infant microbiome and the role of bifidus infantum in terms of infant development. We are an investor in that company. We are an investor in Pivot Bio, along with DCVC, where we are looking at nitrogen fixation, nitrogen nutrition for cereals so that we can actually provide that nitrogen nutrition, not the way Haber-Bosch designed at the turn of the last century, but what we can do at the turn of this century. Similarly, there are going to be a series of interesting genes that we are going to identify. We can hardly cultivate about 20 to 30% of the microbes that are resident either in the rhizosphere or in our gut. When we begin to understand the diversity of the biological capabilities of these organisms, it provides us with better enzymes, better metabolic pathways, metabolites about which we know nothing about at this point of time, which means that our ability to actually impact both the crops as well as the humans and the animals, the possibilities are enormous.
Excellent. So foods was 2 to 3 with these 5. Microbiome is 5 to 0. There's a good debate going on. What else, guys? What are you excited about? So if I were to ask you, what are 1 or 2 other pet themes that you're going after? You talked about therapeutics. Is that the main one for you?
So we're interested across the chain of life sciences. So where there is a computationally advantaged life science, so that means food, agriculture, therapeutics, and biotechnology broadly. And we like combining those things. And so we look, in the past with some companies where they have a really interesting novel platform technology, what often happens is that there's some product that goes into therapeutics or whatnot that sort of parasitizes that platform. So we're interested in developing companies that are able to pursue multiple verticals broadly. A lot of really interesting companies out there right now. A lot of finally cross-pollination between folks with AI backgrounds, like formal AI backgrounds, approaching biotechnology and vice versa. And so for the past 5 years, this is an area where we've been investing in heavily and are really happy with what we've seen. In an area that it honestly has sort of under-delivered in the past because the compute stacks just weren't mature enough.
So it seems that you're most excited about like AI, if I were to look at the underlying theme out there.
That the Venn diagram of where AI meets life sciences.
Okay, so AI meets life sciences.
Yep.
Seth?
I think the potential for cell-free systems for either manufacturing or discovery is pretty unexplored, and I think has a lot of potential. We are supporting one company called Tierra Bio that's doing very interesting things with cell-free systems, discovering natural products. I think by componentizing and modularizing the cell, you can sort of increase the speed of those design build test cycles talked about earlier. I think there's still a lot of potential for green chemicals. I just really want the petrochemicals industry to go away. And generally,
careful, huh?
Sorry. You gotta hedge. You gotta hedge.
That's why we're never gonna be friends.
And I think generally, infrastructure level technologies are very interesting to us. So things like DNA synthesis, maybe enzymatic DNA synthesis, things like biocontainment solutions, or just simple things like lab automation, companies like Opentrons. I think there's still a lot of improvement for building out the infrastructure, and I think as the synthetic biology industry grows, a lot of those companies can create and capture a lot of value.
This is a complex question because there's a lot of things I'm really excited about that aren't quite ready for prime time or businesses yet. I think there's so much fertile ground in terms of applying the gene editing technologies to human health and disease. Very far out, but very exciting, transformative, hands down. Despite what I said about food earlier, I'm very excited about the long-term potential of the space. Near term, I think it's still going to be a lot of nuts and bolts, kind of, old-fashioned, looks like metabolic engineering going on. It works. It makes money. You can build a business off of it today. In general, the spaces that we are excited about are things like biotech meets consumer. I've yet to see many companies execute well in this space, but I think that the team that has the right expertise and that can bring it to consumer in form of different applications, such as diagnostics, could be phenomenally interesting. Very hard to execute on, but if the right group of people can come together to do it, I think that there's huge amounts of value and opportunity there.
Why does the consumer element make it more interesting to you?
For me, because I think it's an unexplored and unleveraged niche right now. Because I think that's just a hard. When I'm thinking about what a competitive advantage could be, I don't see those two worlds coming together yet. And so, if those two worlds could collide, I could see a whole new set of business opportunity there. I see a lot of B2B happening in synthetic biology, not a lot of B2C, which is just hard in general. And then let's add the complexity of biotech in. But I think if a company could execute on that in the direct-to-consumer health space, let's say it's not prescription health, it would be things like skincare, gut health, that sort of thing. I think there's a ton of opportunity.
I think because of the idea of focusing on platform technologies and enabling technologies for synthetic biology field, I think the most exciting field for us is DNA synthesis specifically, that enables longer read, higher yield, faster, cheaper solutions. And that could be through kind of what we're doing through Mubadala is like funding SynBio, where they integrate the kind of semiconductor industry with synthetic biology to produce kind of DNA synthesis or synthesized DNA, as well as enzymatic, specifically enzymatic DNA synthesis is an area that we're monitoring closely. And these two areas, if they're successful, I think it will even kind of unbox a lot of innovation that's yet to be determined.
Good. I'm not sure how many hours we have to talk about this, but I'll simplify it. So certainly, the notion that biology can address some of the issues that have not been addressed, whether it is in agriculture or in fermentation, or whether it is in food or disease prevention, diagnostics, those are all areas that excite us. I'll just use this as a simple example to make the point. Photosynthesis is a very inefficient process. About 1% to 2% of the sun energy, the solar energy that falls on the plant is actually converted to metabolic energy. There is no reason why we can't improve today, in this day and age, that efficiency of conversion of light energy to metabolic energy. If you have fundamental inventions that can then be leveraged for improving crops, it's an area that excites us. Similarly, sunlight today, it is converted to 700 nanometers before the electrons get excited inside the cell for purposes of harnessing that energy. I'm not sure with climate change how many sunny days we will have and whether those sunny days will last for 90 days, 100 days, or 30 days. That opportunity to leverage different qualities of light and produce food, that's an interesting area for us. If you can talk to us about animal nutrition, whether it is companion animals or whether it is farm animals or humans, about the role that diet can play in terms of improving human wellness, that's of interest to us. There is no reason why people should be taking statins to manage their LDL cholesterol. There is no reason why we actually have blood pressure. That opportunity at the age of 35 or 40 for the rest of people's lives so that we can manage blood pressure better. These are actually embedded in the molecules we consume, and there are opportunities to build the sensor systems that can report on this on a regular basis, and we can control that with our diet and lifestyle. I think these are fantastic opportunities. Longer term, we are also interested in this notion of longevity and how these same tools can be leveraged for managing that. That's the vision that drives us. We're not going to make investments in every one of them. Some of these are still science projects, but nevertheless, as these sciences mature, there are also opportunities to make very profitable investments.
That's pretty bold. So what I heard was a lot of passion on multiple technologies across like platforms. Uh, there's a lot of money to be made, even in the small things, as you like enable this system to work. Some interest around B2B to B2C, and C being that. And to your point, Kishore, there are endless opportunities. We've just begun to understand it, and what happens every day around us is just amazing. And one day we'll hopefully be able to conquer that and do much more with that. This is good. So as you're looking at companies, you all invest in all of them. What are you looking for, especially in this space?
You just start again. I always get to start this panel. It's fantastic.
I'm happy to start if you want me to start.
I should have.
I want to start.
I should
Can
just
start?
strategically gone through and taken all your answers. So I think what we look for, what I look for, is an entrepreneurial team who has been in the position to see an insight and has the skills to execute on that insight. And I think that's really important. And so, we keep track of a lot of young entrepreneurs. We have a venture scholar program that we bring in new graduates, and we encourage people to go and talk and learn in the industries in which they're interested in building companies. Whether that's they go and talk to a corporate VC in this space, which we're happy to make introductions, or they go and spend some time there. It's really important that we think that they see that problem from the inside out. Or at least build a team around them that can see those problems inside out. So I think primarily because we all just talked about technology, that's of course very important in our space. If it's a regulated space, IP is really, really important. Publishing, having really good data packages is really important. But I think just on top of that, we'd like entrepreneurs that have some insight that they're really prepared to execute on well.
I agree with all that. My strong suspicion is that I'm going to agree with most of what's said, and so I'll maybe just focus on the way in which I think we're different. So the third circle in our Venn diagram was massive positive social or environmental impact. And so we not only sort of believe business should be about that, but we believe that businesses that have some sort of impact baked into their bottom line will outperform on a purely financial basis. And so this is very, very important to us. And there's a huge shift that's happening. So basically since 1970s, this guy Milton Friedman, Nobel Prize-winning economist, wrote this op-ed in the New York Times called "The Social Responsibility of Business is to Increase Its Profits." And in this essay, he said that the sole purpose of business should be maximizing shareholder value and nothing else. And he literally says, any businessman that considers the welfare of their employees or the health of their customers or the effects on the environment, those businessmen are undermining the basis of free society. And this is sort of how people thought about business over the last 50 years, and it's been, I think, both incredibly destructive and has prevented business from achieving its full potential. And so we see a trend back towards a type of business that actually considers those things and considers it a strength of the business. And we think these businesses will outperform and have the biggest impacts. And so that's incredibly important to us. We not only want to see that technical diligence makes sense and that there's a good plan to scale and that the market is either huge already or growing and that the founders have a personal connection to the problem, but we want to know that it can have a huge positive impact on the world.
So I'll give it. It's really simple. Market, product, and team. So is there a real market? Is there a need out there that people are willing to pay money to solve? Number two, do you have a competitive advantage in solving that problem for them? So why you and why your product? And number three, do you have the team to be able to execute on it and actually deliver it to the market? And it turns out that if you have all three, no matter what the technology or the market or the need, you have a good chance of creating a great business. It's really hard to be an entrepreneur. And so it's really easy to sit up here and to judge a bunch of companies, but it really comes down to the entrepreneur themselves. There is an unlimited amount of money in the world right now. There is a very limited supply of great entrepreneurs. And the one thing I would say is I would like more people to become entrepreneurs and create great companies. And I think one of the reasons I like working with Jenny at Genoa is one of the things both of us are passionate about and love doing is helping entrepreneurs build great companies and being on that journey with you.
Yeah, I think everything that you guys said resonates. The one thing that I will add is, platform technologies without the technology risk necessarily, and a simple business model. There are a lot of companies that we've seen that you have to step back from it and say like, so how are they going to make money, right? Or what is their business model? What is their revenue model? And just because we invest at the inflection of expansion and growth, I think these sometimes are undermined in the minds of entrepreneurs, and they feel that they can sell, which is great. But at the same time, if you cannot explain your business model in a very subtle way and very simple way, then you're going to have a hard time to sell, basically, to your customers. So that's what we anchor on.
I think I'm going to repeat myself and say in slightly different terms and with some unique vantage points. The first fundamental question we always ask is, what's the problem that is going to be addressed by this business? What's the solution that they're bringing to the table? In bringing that solution to the marketplace, does it take 1 Nobel Prize or 5 Nobel Prizes, or have the basic fundamental discoveries been made? So how much of an investment, how long, who cares, and who are the gatekeepers? Are these the entrepreneurs that we want to partner with? Because this is a marriage, and this marriage is likely to exist for at least 5 to 7 years, sometimes longer, and maybe there is a repeat performance in another company. So it is also a relationship. And therefore, for an entrepreneur, they should be asking the question, is this the venture capital partner that I want to partner with? It is also an equally important consideration. And then, of course, there are the usual trials and tribulations of what is the business model that allows us to extract the value. Many, many times, if it is a new technology that is addressing a latent demand, you are not going to get that right, neither the business model nor the value capture model. So we have to invest in those people who have the ability to adapt, actually accept that failure will occur. Shit will happen all the time. That recovering from it faster is going to be an important aspect of the journey. So we work with people who have those kinds of capabilities, realizing that we all change, markets will change, the environment will change as the days come, but we have to be constantly adapting ourselves.
Thank you. This time I'm going to stop with you, Kishore, so we give her a break. This is going to be rapid fire, 2 quick questions, so in less than 5 seconds, you can give me an answer.
Kish can't do that.
Huh?
Teasing.
Is the synthetic bio a major, a minor, or a hobby for you?
It is my life.
Life, okay. Hello?
It's hard to tell. Depends. But it depends on the field, right? Because synthetic biology really touches, like if you think of healthcare and pharmaceutical, is definitely a major focus. If you look at food, it's a hobby, that I personally am passionate about. I read about and I understand. It really depends on which sector, but I would say it's a mix.
So like after Gabe said a lot of grief on food,
Exactly.
Food is what you're after. Okay.
It's my passion.
It's a passion.
It's a passion.
You changed the question on me.
It's 1/3 of my life.
It's 1/3 of your life, okay?
I've been in this space all my life, so I'll have to go with that one.
So you guys, I'm like serious about this. As you look at this space, what is the biggest investment opportunity you have missed and why? And I'll start there again.
What's the biggest opportunity?
You have missed investing in.
I'll just use this as an example. We looked at a company which was in the business of visioning agricultural fields. We analyzed it. We helped the company even develop its deck. And then, of course, somebody else came back with a pre-money valuation that was 2x higher. And then the company got acquired very quickly. We missed that opportunity. So I've been around the block enough number of days in my life to realize that things will happen. You will miss some, but that shouldn't stop me from pursuing what our goal in life is. We probably had an opportunity to make investments in DNA editing at an earlier stage. We missed that, but that's all right. We have invested in other companies which are making DNA editing much more household. Inscripta is the company that we have invested in. So there are always going to be opportunities, and you just have to wait for that right moment and right time. Don't compromise on your values.
It was supposed to be rapid fire, so I'll go ahead.
I mean, we didn't have a fund at the time when the company was being formed, but in my opinion, Illumina is, we owe to Illumina a lot of what's been happening right now in synthetic biology, frankly speaking. I wish I was part of that kind of growth for the company, so that would be one.
This is a tough one. You don't always know right away. I mean, there's definitely been companies that I wrote off, and then they managed to eke it out in the end, and that's very impressive. I mean, it's a slow game sometimes until you take off and catch on fire.
Our fund, which is called 50 Years, has only been around for 3 years, so we don't really have enough data to know what decisions we made that were really boneheaded. But I wish we were around for more than 3 years, because I would have loved to have seeded a company like Ginkgo. I'm a huge fan of what Jason and team are doing there.
So yeah, our fund's been around for about 6 months. So there were there were companies on the that we didn't quite get to in time that hopefully we'll catch the next time around. But we stay close to the entrepreneurs and stick around to help them out. I joked with Seth earlier that I missed all the tech investments early on. Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, all those ones.
Now to the end, 2 words each. Which is the biggest issue in this field? We talked about regulatory before, right?
Regulatory.
Regulatory?
2 words?
Yeah, 2 words or less.
I gave 1.
Can I do 3?
You can do 3. Social impact is good. So go ahead with 3.
PhDs becoming founders.
Okay.
Regulatory.
Regulatory,
I would say market perception.
market perception.
Social freedom to operate.
Okay. Guys, this was a phenomenal group. Thank them for all what they've been doing. Thank you so much. You guys were great.